Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I wanted to open up today's show with an opportunity for people to, ask any questions about yesterday's show. Oftentimes when we break this kind of profound information, it raises a lot of questions in terms of, the role of certain elements, copper, iron, what's too much, what's not enough. And I saw a little bit of that going on in yesterday's show. Now, Rebecca's asking here, wants to know what the blue ring around the eye means. And my advice is, we don't really know what that means. And we should, not get too caught up on some of this stuff. Yes, if you have a copper ring around the eye, you should understand that you might have some copper toxicity. In other words, the copper is building up in your liver and could cause some health conditions. And that is a well-known telltale sign that you have copper buildup. But in terms of other colors in the eye, I'm not really sure about that. I have gold centers to my eyes with green around the edges. And I wouldn't read too much into that. I think the focus really should be that we are all saved regardless of the bloodline. I think if there was any huge takeaway from yesterday's show, that would be the fact that we all are dependent on copper. And that tells you that the taint or the infection of the copper is ubiquitous throughout creation. And that's exactly what the parables say. It says that, that to all sin is ascribed to the devil, and that it's in us all, that we're born into sin. So there's your proof right there. The part that we're responsible for is fighting that sin and trying not to give over into it and not to worship the sin and, want more and more and more copper inside of us to take over the iron-based blood, which is what the elite do. They want the high copper levels. They inbreed because of that. We're supposed to fight the sin, just as exactly what God told Cain, that he needs to fight his tendencies for sin. So I think that's the takeaway. I don't think we should get too caught up on, physical attributes and things like that. Even down to eye color, I don't even know really. We looked at eye color in the past, but can we really look at someone's eye color and determine, make any assumptions about that? I don't think we should. I don't think we should try to do that. Then we get into more divisive language, and we get into separating people based on their appearance and color, and that's not what God came here to do. So there's one question answered. Thanks for that question, Rebecca. I appreciate that. And the flesh is weak, but the spirit is strong, says Allie. Absolutely. Jesus came to save both Jews and Gentiles. There are many examples of him even healing Gentiles in all throughout the New Testament. So it doesn't matter what your bloodline is, but if you're the elite and you're giving yourself over into sin, into your bloodline, and ruling other people, and all the other things that come along with the sinful lifestyle, then of course that becomes a problem. So does anyone else have any other questions about yesterday's show and any concerns about it? Beyond that, I would say that everything should be done in moderation. Talked about vitamin C, and anything over 1,000 milligrams will actually block your ability to absorb copper. And copper is exactly what you need when you're actually sick, when you're starting to come down with something. That little bit of copper is integral in your immune system. So if you're dosing 2,000 milligrams of vitamin C when you're about to get sick, you're working against yourself. So, things like this we have to be aware of and watch out for. And I do know people that do that. They do take very high doses, because what is the common consensus? What we've been told is that you can't overdose on vitamin C. This is what we've been told, and you can take as much as you want, and your body will simply pass it through if it doesn't use it. But now we're finding out that too much can actually block copper absorption, which you need for your immune system. So the Bible stands correct, doesn't it? It's everything in moderation. Most of yesterday's show wasn't to have you make changes in your diet and all this thing. It was more of the spiritual analysis of how our bodies work and seeing that reflected in the body code, which is how your body works and how that relates to the spiritual things of the Bible. The truth about the kingdom of heaven is actually within us. And that doesn't mean that we're supposed to trust our hearts. What that means is just simply looking at the anatomy and physiology of the body teaches us things about the kingdom of heaven. And that's what that means. Sometimes that could be misconstrued, but that's what the body code actually is, that God gave us a miniature version of heaven right under our skin so that we can observe it as we did with the copper being at enmity with the iron in your body. That if you have too much iron, you won't be able to absorb copper. So, and the wheat and the tares, exactly. Tropic thunder, exactly. The wheat and the tares. So, there you go. And so, and then also understanding that different types of anemia could also be because of copper deficiencies, that you need copper as well. There is such a thing as copper anemia. So if you're having symptoms of anemia, it could be the copper that you're lacking. So hopefully that clarifies some things. Anybody else have any other questions before we get into some of these headlines today? It's Friday, and I'm glad it's Friday. I don't know about you guys. A little bit of a snowstorm here in Connecticut mixed with some rain. So we got the wintry mix going on. Not too bad though, maybe a couple inches on the ground. Hopefully the rain will melt that away if it doesn't freeze tonight. But let's read in here in the comments. Now, another sign, sometimes I'll read through the comments, most of them, after the videos, and sometimes there's some confusion, so it's good to clarify things for people, clarify things for people in the comment section during the first part of the show. That's why we're doing that at this point. So Coors has made a beer with holy water. That's interesting. Wow. Yep. They're always mocking God, aren't they? They're always mocking God. And what's interesting to me is they want us not to believe in God, but everything they do is obsessed with God, isn't it? So that reveals the truth that God is real and that his son is real. If the enemy just stopped talking about it, he'd probably be better off, wouldn't he? So, what do I think about the Russia and the Ukraine? I've given some thoughts on that. We covered it on some previous shows, but make a long story short, the people always suffer, don't they? For these politicians doing what they do. I think I had mentioned that the pipeline and that whole thing, that it was all orchestrated. They don't want us dependent on natural gas. They're doing away with natural gas. So it could have something to do with that. But we'll talk a little bit about that later in the show. I've got some comments on that I want to share with you guys, because my son asked me the same thing. And for him to, recognize, international events is pretty rare. He's 22, so he doesn't sit and watch the news. But even he heard about what was going on over there and asked me about it. So I'll tell you about that a little bit later in the show. So that'll be the end of our Q&A session here. If you guys have other questions, you go ahead and pop them in there. But I just wanted to give my full focus and attention to anyone that had any questions from yesterday, because yesterday's show was such an important show. All right, let's get into some of these headlines now. I wanted to start the show off with something funny. This little boy here, he's like a real life Thump mini-me lookalike. Look at this little boy here. Now, his hair has been deemed uncombable. In fact, the condition that he has, it's a rare genetic characteristic. Looks like he put his finger in a light socket. Let me play a little bit of this so you guys can laugh. Look at this boy's hair. He's like a mini-me Thump, isn't he? And his parents put him on whatever, Twitter, Instagram, I don't know. There's his little brother or sister, I can't tell. But look at the hair on this little boy. This is just hilarious. It's very, very cute. Now you have to wonder if his parents, secretly got some hairspray and tried to give him the thump comb over. I've got some pictures somewhere. I don't know, but let's take a look at this. This is so funny. So here's some pictures and the uncombable locks. This little boy here. Now, I don't think there's anything, spiritually significant going on here. I thought you guys would just get a kick out of this. Let's read a little bit of this. When 16-month-old Lachlan samples, oh my gosh, like locks of hair, really? He was born, he had jet black hair, not too far off from his mom, Caitlin's color. But by the time he was 6 months old, that dark hair was replaced by what Caitlin and her husband, Caleb, affectionately called peach fuzz. We were like, huh, what is this? She tells people of Lachlan's nickname Locke, newly blonde, soft hair. So, hey, this could have been in the bloodline. Like maybe that's why their family name is Lachlan. Because, some genetic trait generations and generations ago or something. Who knows? We knew it was different, but didn't know exactly how. And then he kept growing and growing. It kept growing and growing. By 9 months, his hair was white blonde, super soft, and sticking straight up out of his head. It matched his 3-year-old brother's Shep hair in color, but could not be more different in texture. People were definitely noticing it. Oh, of course, she's 33 years old, right? She got a message on Instagram from a stranger who asked if Locke had been diagnosed with uncombable hair syndrome. I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? Something wrong with my baby. So she Googled it, of course, and up comes this information that she got from the pediatrician saying that, this was uncombable hair syndrome. We went to see her, and she said she'd only seen this once in 19 years. So that's interesting, the whole 19-year cycle, right? She didn't think it was uncombable hair syndrome because of how rare it is, but they took samples, and a pathologist looked at it under a special microscope. After looking at the structures of Locke's hair, they were able to confirm that it was uncombable hair syndrome. An extremely rare condition that causes the hair to grow with a very soft and easily breakable texture. Locke is one of just 100 known cases of the condition. Whoa, let's take another look at this little boy. I just want to do a comb over on him, just to see what it would look like. That is so cute. There he goes. Looks like the wind's just going to take him away, huh? I wonder if all the other little kids, try to touch his hair. I'm sure they do, right? So anyway, I thought that was funny. Well, let's read the comments down here. Every once in a while, Yahoo will open up the comments because, only on stories like this. My comment got blocked. I put a community post up. All I said was washing money, and my post got taken down because of some celebrity, donated like $50 million. And we all know why they do that. They don't do it out of the kindness of their heart. But Yahoo deleted my comment, sent me a notification. Weird, right? So here's the comments on this little boy's hair. Rockstar. So that's why Boris Johnson's hair looks the way it does. Wow. So now we have that Gene Wilder. Now we know what Gene Wilder had. Give that kid a guitar and some drumsticks. There's Beavis and Butthead, of course. He's lucky to be a boy. He can shave it short and it becomes more suited, at least. The few girls I know with it have had to overcome so much more. Wow. There are only 100 known cases. There's no scenario where you know a few girls with this syndrome. Hey, there's a truther right there. Common sense. Let's see the reply here. If you know the groups, you know a lot of them from talking with those in the groups. Okay. I grew up with someone who had this condition, although there was no discussion of it being anything other than weird hair. The term syndrome never arose, and unlike the child in this article, the individual's siblings all had dark hair and brown eyes. It's interesting. What do you know? He may become president one day. A real little boy, Goldilocks. So anyway, is this Yahoo staff? Weird. All right, so obviously Yahoo's very closely watching the comment sections of their videos. Now, let's get into this story. Now, one of you guys sent me this. We covered the green bud legalization, hadn't we? We've also covered people falling out of windows meme. But did you ever think that the two would be together in one story? Someone falling out of the window and the bud legalization travesty in America? Well, here it is right here. Inside California's green bud crisis. And in this story, a person falls out of a window. Let's read this. Inside California's Canaan bus crisis. Small weed farms are facing extinction under oppressive regulations, high taxes, and statewide collapse in pricing. This is February 2022, you guys. Recent article. Now, I'm not a person who partakes, and I don't judge people who do, but I do feel as though this was a whole setup. And it's confirmed in this article that the whole legalization was a giant setup to take people down, give you a false sense of security, and then go around arresting people and taking over growers and commercializing it and GMO and everything else. Let's read this article because this is kind of spooky. It's a raw December day in the heart of California weed country, and thousands of weed growers, purveyors, and smokers are gathered at the 18th annual Emerald Cup Harvest Ball in Santa Rosa. The blissful funk of the psychedelic soul band wafts from an outdoor stage as a chilly drizzle falls, and chipper corporate promoters hand out branded rain slickers to shoppers. They're waiting to get into a makeshift dispensary for the popular weed brand cookies, housed in a magnificent geodesic dome packed with display cases full of bud, concentrates, vape cartridges, and seeds for sale. In the indoor Puffco Pavilion, so basically they're talking about this huge gathering. There's weed everywhere you look. California's enormous weed market, which reached an estimated $4.4 billion in sales in 2020, has seemingly reached peak weed capitalism. The mood is different, decidedly different in neighboring building, where mom and pop cultivators were just accosted by uniformed agents from the Department of Weed Control. Moments before, they'd entered the room clad in olive green jackets and navy caps, going around to each of the booths, which were given to 27 grows for free as part of the Cup's new small farm initiative. And instead, they put away any actual weed on display. Since the small farms don't have retail licenses, which cost upwards of $100,000 per year, you needed a license for $100,000 a year just to operate a weed farm. Event organizers had told them they were permitted to show flower samples at their tables and direct buyers to nearby dispensary booths for purchases. They were wrong. Farmers, most of whom had traveled long distances from rural Northern California to show their weed to buyers, were baffled by the agent's demands. So this is that false sense of security we were talking about, isn't it? How are we supposed to sell a product that you can't display? Asked one of the growers. People want to look at it. They want to smell it. We supposed to show them a photograph? The scale of the DCC enforcement seemed to be indicative of the bureaucratic overreach that's sinking small farms around the state. It's super frustrating, says Michael Katz, executive director of the Mendocino Weed Alliance, who was heading up the Small Farms Initiative. Eventually, Emerald Cup organizers secured a compromise with the DCC, and paperwork was drawn up to allow them to continue displaying product. But the overwhelming sense amongst the so-called legacy growers is that they're at a breaking point, exhausted by the regulations of the industry that they largely created. Once again, the small farms are getting screwed. Here's one of those farms here. Look how beautiful that is. The countryside there. They've got them in pots, it appears. Now, here's where I was already onto this in the beginning. I was like, why would the federal government and, be getting tax money off of these excise taxes off of every single one of these states, and these state governments legalizing this what's the flip side of this? What are they really doing? And even as far back as 5 to 10 years ago, when all this kind of started, I was like, there's something going on here, you guys. There's no way they're going to let you just walk down the street and blaze it up and let you keep growing your stuff. And sure enough, now we're starting to see what's really going on. It's basically a takeover. False sense of security, criminalizing all these people, putting them on lists. You're waiving your Second Amendment right in many cases if you hold a card. This is not good, you guys. And I think most people would agree that it would be better off just going back to the 1980s and 90s before all this happened. And guess what? There's a level of self-control, isn't there? When things are, not out in the open and people do this as a personal thing and it doesn't become their entire life and all they talk about and all they do, then it has some kind of level of self-governance, doesn't it? You know that you can't just walk around doing that because it could negatively affect your life. But now that they've got it all out in the open, I think many people are partaking far more than they should, which is standing in the way of all kinds of things in their life and even your health. So I'm not one to judge. I'm just simply stating some of the things that have truly happened. And then maybe it was way better the way it was before, where people did it on the weekends or every so often, and they self-governed because it wasn't something that was so widely accepted. Now we've got, you don't even know what you're getting when you go to these dispensaries. Could be GMO, could be this, could be that. I mean, what do you think that they're doing with the labeling on this stuff? It might be labeled non-GMO, but is it really? I mean, are you going to trust these federal agents to properly label this stuff? Of course not. They'll find some loophole, figure out a way to say it's GMO and free when it's really not. And of course, the rabbit hole goes very deep from there. When you're buying this from them, you're actually supporting the very oppressive government that you claim to oppose. Let's read a little bit more of this. The struggle between small farmers and corporate weed can be traced back to when California voters approved Prop 64 in 2016. Since the 60s, weed farming has been the economic lifeblood of many Northern California communities, especially those in the counties of Humboldt, Trinity, and Mendocino, collectively known as the Emerald Triangle. Small farmers were given a measure of protection when the Compassionate Care Act legalized medical green in 96, giving rise to robust entrenched gray market that lasted for decades. Under 215, farmers came out of the illicit market to grow medical weed under relatively modest regulations. For example, each county set a limit to the number of plants a farm could grow. See, already they had too much power right there. You can't tell people what to do. Farmers were required to apply for a license and pay taxes to the state, and some towns implemented local sales taxes, but the law didn't create a regulatory body to manage the industry, which thrived as the medical collectives popped up to serve customers. Protecting existing growers was a pillar of Prop 64, which legalized the green for adult use. Worried that the measures would fail without the support of rural farmers, legalization advocates included a provision to encourage legacy growers to join the legal market, promising that no cultivation site would be larger than 1 acre until 2023. This supposedly meant that small farms would face competition from multi-acre mega farms for at least 5 years. Gosh, these feds are dirty, aren't they? The whole thing was a setup. Prop 64 was built to protect the small farmers so that they wouldn't be an overabundance of weed. But in November 2017, 2 months before Prop 64 was set to go into effect, weed industry lobbyists persuaded the California Department of Food, blah, 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 to change the provision. They removed the limit on the number of quarter-acre licenses available to individuals or companies, creating a loophole that opened the door to multi-acre farms through the bundling or stacking license. So this is just all corruption here. It's all just pawns on a board, moving things around, a shell game. So that, and who ends up making out on this? The people in power and control, not the small person. Let me get to the part where the guy falls out of the window. Oh gosh, I gotta search through this whole thing to find it. I'm not even sure if this is in here. Oh, buddy. Well, I can't find it now. Well, so I'll find this later, maybe at the end of the show, and we'll come back to this. But basically, one of the guys who was involved in this had literally died by falling out of a window, and it was very suspicious as to how he died. He was one of the people that was integral in fighting against all of this. So, the chessboard continues, right? Now, let's get into some of these other stories for today. And apparently, the crisis in Ukraine is seemed to be upstaged, or seemed to have upstaged the American trucker convoy. These people are stacking up, going from west to east coast. In this trucker convoy right now, it's somewhat small, but they're making their way toward DC. And of course, the situation in Ukraine is just overshadowing this. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? But that didn't stop Bo Jivin from assigning 700 National Guard to fill the mall in anticipation of the trucker convoy. National Guard to help DC control traffic for truck convoys. Pentagram has approved the deployment of 700 unarmed National Guard troops to the nation's capital as it prepares for trucker convoys that are planning protests against the spam-demic restrictions beginning next week. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin approved the request Tuesday from the District of Columbia government and the U.S. Crapper Hole Police, Pentagon said in a statement Tuesday night. So, we'll see what happens over there. But this is not good, you guys. Same thing that happened during the Eggnog the Nation. Remember, they rolled out all the National Guard. You know, it's interesting because the National Guard is an interesting organization, right? Because it's closer to home. These are men and women that are in and around us who sign up for the Guard, but not quite the military, right? It is the military, but it kind of isn't. And so the federal government will wield these National Guard members to lower our defenses. Because who's going to go up against the National Guard? Most people won't, even if they are in opposition to whatever legislation or whatever, anything that's going on. They're less likely to clash with National Guard than they are with a full military presence, aren't they? And so it's kind of dirty how the feds use the National Guard in these kinds of situations when they're trying to quell a protest or something like that. Like that should be not part of the Constitution. You shouldn't be able to pull our own people against us when we know for a fact that the consensus among the people is strongly in the favor of something. I mean, this is just like their last resort. So there's more about the convoy in this article as well. Well, if you live in California or on the West Coast or anywhere for that matter, you'll understand that gas prices are through the roof. Now, this article seems to try to explain how what's going on in the Ukraine is still affecting our gas prices. This is crazy because we were told that we're, as a country, almost completely energy dependent. But yet, what's going on in the Ukraine affects our gas prices. Welcome to backwards world. Gas prices soar to record levels in California amid the Ukraine crisis and tax hikes. Analysts are warning motorists in California to hold on to their wallets, as a host of factors will take already record high gas prices to new levels. They're paying almost $5 a gallon, $1.20 more than national average in California. Unbelievable. I don't think I've ever seen it that high in my lifetime. So, everyone is going up the same, but no one is going to match California's prices. There are several factors, is what they're saying here, biggest being the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The political uncertainty over a possible invasion has affected oil prices globally. We're subject to international supply and demand. How long it progresses through the summer depends on Russia. So they're blaming Russia now for our gas prices. They still haven't said what it has to do with it. Just uncertainty, that doesn't mean anything. It would be different if this was like in the Mideast and we weren't sure how we were going to get oil that we were importing, but we don't take oil from them. So what is this even about? It says here, California's regulators have also affected prices. Specifically, its gas tax of 50 cents per gallon. The tax, which pays for road repairs and maintenance throughout the state, is one of the largest in the nation. And it's gone up with inflation. Don't you think they should be making the taxes go down when there's inflation? Welcome to backwards world. The taxes make a huge difference in the overall price. That's why you haven't seen as big of a jump in Oregon or Washington, he said. Nuisance has proposed to halt a scheduled gas tax increase, but has not received support from Democratic members of the state legislature. Wow. Said that spring is around the time that gas prices tend to go up, and there's very little that motorists who drive in California can do to avoid taking a financial hit at the pump. So there you go. Now this next story is kind of funny because it appears as though meth is still alive and well in Missouri, as it is in many parts of the country. But these guys tried to hide it in orange Gatorade. When you put meth in Gatorade, I guess Gatorade gives it back, doesn't it? Life is a sport. What a way to try to compete with Mountain Dew. Cooler with 30 pounds of meth disguised as orange Gatorade found in Missouri. Look at this. They boiled it down and reduced it down, and there are the rocks down there. Let's read about what happened here. It looked to be a close resemblance of an icy orange flavored sport drink in Gatorade cooler was not as it seemed. This is not the kind of ice you put in a sports drink, Missouri State Highway Patrol said. This ice and orange Gatorade combination was actually 30 pounds of meth in a solution. Authorities say they found the meth-filled cooler after stopping a speeding driver heading eastbound on Interstate 70. During the traffic stop, K9 Roney smelled narcotics in the 2020 Chevy Malibu. They were seized. In addition to $1,100 in cash, the driver, who was not identified, was driving from Vegas to Philadelphia before being pulled over about 1,000 miles from their destination. Wow. Now, I've gone on these long road trips, and yeah, I got pulled over. I got pulled over in Indiana once because I was driving in the fast lane, and the trooper said I was supposed to pull over. Anyway, even back then, he didn't pull out a dog and search my car, but my car was loaded up with a bunch of stuff. I guess I looked a little bit suspicious, but it was kind of weird how he pulled me over for something like that. But you could tell he was fishing. He wanted to see what I was doing, because there are certain parts of this country that are corridors. And so they try to pick these people off when they can. They see something suspicious. There's usually higher police presence through some of these corridors looking for stuff like this. In this case, these people got busted. Let's get into this next story. What else do we have here? Yeah. Of course, we got more of these back to normal fake outs, I call them, where they say everything's back to normal, but it's really not, as Los Angeles officially announces it will lift indoor mask mandates this Friday, only if you got vaccinated. Let's read this. So, public health officials didn't wait until Thursday to reveal their plan to mostly lift the county's indoor masking mandate. A statement from the department is issued this afternoon officially announced the change and outlined what it referred to as two options for removing masking requirements for fully vaccinated individuals. So don't believe the hype. Nothing has really gone back to normal. It's all contingent on if you will lay down and take what they're giving you. And meanwhile, small businesses in America are still folding under all of these rules and mandates. The latest victim are the dry cleaners. Dry cleaners are beginning to lose as the spam-demic drags on. These people had to close shop. The first to go in the neighborhood was GQ Cleaners, where the for rent sign quickly replaced any semblance of life inside the blue walled shop. Next was Kim's Cleaners. So I don't know why the cleaners are being particularly hard hit. Well, if you can imagine, a lot of people are working from home now. They don't need to have nice clothes to go to work. So that means less clothes being cleaned at the cleaners. You got the, funerals. People are not holding funerals as much because we weren't allowed for so long. People got used to it. They're like, why have a funeral? We could just save a bunch of money and cremate the body. So then you don't have suits going to the funeral. You don't have suits for proms and things like that because they're on lockdown too still. And all the other things we need suits and dresses for, right, that usually get dry cleaned are going down the tubes. I can imagine these people at the dry cleaners are probably taking a 50% hit on the amount of business they used to do for people who used to get out and do things in life. Graduations, the list goes on and on and on, right? So this is an unintended consequence of what has happened to people. Crazy. What else do we have here? Now, here's what I call Honey Trap 2.0, where 300,000 people, names, addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers, likely added to the CIA watch list, I can imagine. That's how many people were waiting in line to use Thump's new ThumpsTruthSocial app. And it didn't even go live. And they probably sat there and collected all the names and go, okay, we'll put these people on the list. If they were dumb enough to sign up for this and give us all their information, there's somebody we need to watch, especially after the Crapper Hole event. This whole thing seems to me like a setup. I know we put out a call on a couple shows ago and asked if anyone had signed up for it. I don't think one person on our channel signed up for it. I think we all know what this was about. ThumpsTruthSocial's disastrous launch raises doubts about its long-term viability. Former President Thump is facing a bungled website launch of his own. His long-promised social network, ThumpsTruthSocial, has been almost entirely inaccessible in the first days of its grand debut due to technical glitches, a 13-hour outage, and 300,000 person waitlist. Now, I'm sure he's spinning this saying, oh, it glitched out because so many people tried to sign up at the same time. That's probably what his side of the story is. Even Trump supporters made jokes about the early slog. Jenna Ellis, a former member of his legal team, posted to Instagram photo showing Thump with his finger hovering over a laptop, letting us on the Truth Social one at a time. The site has been heralded for months as the crown jewel of his post-presidential ambitions, with allies pledging it would revolutionize social media and take down the mainstream social networks where Thump is banned. You know, that sounds great, doesn't it? Someone made a comment the other day and said, you know, they're making this way too complicated. There's no way it's this hard to make a copycat of YouTube and have us all go over there. But apparently it is. All of the other sites are crypto-based. Why is that? Because they're collecting more information. See, they had to decentralize, YouTube and have these other sites because so they could manage the truth community better. That's what this was really all about. If you look at the roots of some of these alternative sites that are all crypto-based, most of them, or tip-based, none of them are ad-based. They don't have the original format of YouTube, which you'd think would be so easy to do, because there are so many businesses who would want to advertise on some of these alternative sites, right? Wouldn't that be pretty simple? All of these sponsors that we see on some of the truth channels here, on YouTube that are sponsoring all these channels. All they got to do is go over to another site and do it that way. Different business model, right? I never understood sponsorships. I never understood somebody giving somebody thousands of dollars a month just to mention or show their product. I mean, there's no way they're getting that money back through sales. I mean, unless that person is mentioning that thing over and over and over again, it just doesn't make sense to me. And so it's inefficient. Better way to do it is put ads on a video or something. But for some reason, nobody can come up with that formula. And it seems so simple, but no one's doing it, right? And so it begs the question, what is really going on here with these alternative sites? And people ask me over and over, why don't you get off of YouTube? And now I'm telling you why. Because there's something fishy about all of it. There's something very, very fishy about these alternative sites. If you look in their terms and conditions, they all have the same exact terms and conditions that YouTube does. They're not as lengthy, but they do say that they have the right to remove and censor content. Now, they don't often exercise that right, but some of us have seen some of these sites that promised they would never do that, who ended up doing it anyway. So, what's the best thing to do? Stay where you can hide in the trees, which is a place like YouTube. You know, if you don't have the focus attention on you, and you can get around the guidelines and all these things by being careful how you say things, then you're probably better off than being out in the open, you know, on a site where the government's probably going on there and getting all your personal information and stalking you, gang stalking you. To me, that seems like a bad plan. So let's keep looking here, because this is crazy. Early glimpses of ThumpsTruthSocial suggest its offerings are almost identical to Twitter and other sites have offered for years, except tweets are called truths and retweets retruths. The site's early struggles also fuel doubts that Thump's company will be able to handle tougher long-term challenges. So here's the other downside of some of these alternative sites. They get overrun with provocateurs, don't they? And you know that where they're coming from. They're government provocateurs. That way, the government can point the finger at these sites and say, look at all these supreme people that are white. Look at all them on here. And look at all the Yahtzees on here. And this is what they do. And then they paint with a broad brush everybody else on the site. And then it delegitimizes and softens the truth. It doesn't make it look as believable. When people with real truth come out and make observations and points and try to communicate information, it almost works against us. So those are just some thoughts. I mean, I don't know. It's just my opinion. Some people might disagree with me, but I've been watching these social media sites very closely. And if you have one takeaway today, then just go into the terms and service of any of these sites that you think are so great and go read the terms and service, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll be like, that's kind of shocking coming from this site who claims to be completely censorship free. So let's get into some of these other stories as we begin to wind down the show today. Now, look at this. The clown show continues as Howdy and Doody get caned off stage right. There was never going to be any indictment or jail time or bankruptcy for Thump. This whole thing was a kangaroo court. And it was propped up to keep the anger going between the right and the left, wasn't it? It was meant to strengthen the rivalry between the right and the left. Because, you know, everybody sticks up for the martyr. And they sent Thump through this martyr phase and got everybody upset that they felt like he was getting picked on. And they said, how can he be bad if the left hates him so much? And that's exactly what they want you to think. How can he be so bad if the left hates him so much? That's the psyop. And you got to wake up to it. It's the, what do they call that? It's a double cross. It's the double rope-a-dope. This is his only legitimacy comes from the opposition that he meets. And so what's the best thing the left can do to keep this thing going is to pretend to really hate him and really oppose him. But then when you really look at the facts, the fact that the Clintrons never went to jail, and you look at what he's really done to oppose the left, you'll see that he hasn't really opposed them very much, has he? And so understand too that it's the left-wing media who's kept his image alive, isn't it? They never stopped reporting on him. It's not anything he's doing that kept his image alive. It's the media that's keeping him alive. And this is where you need to ask why. Why would they keep talking about him when they claim to hate him so much? It's because to keep the paradigm going. So in this latest string of events, the two prosecutors that were leading the Manhattan's DA investigation into Thump, they resigned. So they wasted everybody's emotions and time who cared about this. I didn't care about it, but the people on the left really cared about this. And the people on the right were watching it to see that their hero didn't get dragged through the mud, right? Says their resignations reportedly came after the new Manhattan DA said he wasn't sure about moving forward with the case. Wow. The DA's office previously indicted the Thump organization and its CFO on 15 felony counts. All that just went away. Spokesman for the DA's office confirmed the resignations to the insider, saying, "We're grateful for their service. Investigation is ongoing. Can't comment further." The resignations from the two prosecutors reportedly came after the new DA, Alvin Bragg, expressed doubts about moving forward with a case against Thump. So, smoke and mirrors. It's not even really worth talking about other than to help you understand what this is so you don't get so emotionally invested in the right and the left paradigms. So here we are with Pew Stain. Pew Stain giving American leadership a dose of our own medicine, claiming that there are weapons of masked destruction that are secretly being developed in the Ukraine. Heard that story before, haven't we? And pose a threat to Russia. This is the funniest thing I've ever seen, because the hypocrisy is glaring. Basically, Pew Stain is goofing on American history and politics with regards to, reasons why we have given to go into countries. So Pew Stain's intel is called conspiracy, but U.S. conspiracies are called intelligence. Completely backwards. Now, my son had asked me the other day, yesterday, what was going on with Russia. And I told him, I said, son, think of it this way. What if Mexico was being groomed by China to join some kind of alliance, and, China was sending them supplies and weapons and promising to build bases and support Mexico right on our border? And he just scratched his head and he kind of looked at me. I think he understood what I was talking about. So that's pretty much kind of like what's going on in Russia. We have NATO and all European countries basically right on the western border of Russia. And for some reason, we really care about what's going on in the Ukraine and want that to be in NATO as well. And Russia's like, that's not cool. We've done everything you guys have asked us to. We've ratcheted down our nuclear weapons, which the whole world pretty much did since the 90s. They've been slowly, I know during the Obama years, they were all starting to ratchet down the nuclear weapons. So there is no, threat anymore, according to what they tell us, right? We all know that at any time, if they wanted to, they could blow us all up. But according to what they've told us, there are no more nuclear weapons, or very few that could cause, the world to go up in smoke. But yet, we're so afraid of Russia still, and we want, we don't want them to get Ukraine back, right? So, something weird is going on here. Let's read a little bit of this. Pew Stain spins a theory that Ukraine is on a path to nukes. There's Commander in Bush himself walking up to the podium. When Ukraine gave up a huge arsenal of nukes left on its territory after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it famously struck a deal with Washington, London, and Moscow, trading the weapons for a guarantee of its security and borders. So they're basically making the case here that Ukraine gave up all its nukes already, which they probably did. They converted many of them into nuclear power plants, according to this article. But Putin's saying that they're secretly working with the U.S. to make secret nukes, and that it's threatening his country. Now, I don't believe all of this, but it's funny how Putrain is using this to, basically give us a taste of our own medicine, right? Because this is what we always do. We always say it's a threat to democracy, a threat to this, a threat to that. And it's almost never true. But this is the precept that we give to go to war with anyone we deem necessary. So, a couple more stories for you guys, and I'll come back into the chat. Well, looks like the demand for smack-scenes has come to a standstill. U.S. smaccination drive is bottoming out as Omicron subsides. Now, it's interesting because you still need smack scenes for many of the daily activities of daily life. Entertainment in some cases, concerts, going on a cruise. They're still demanding it. Handwritten law kept by nurses tells the story of the losing battle to get more people smaccinated in this corner of Alabama. Just 14 people showed up. That's great news. In Marion County during the first 6 weeks of the year. That was true even as hospitals in and around the county of roughly 30,000 people filled with virus patients and the death toll climbed. The smaccination drive in the U.S. is grinding to a halt, and the demand has all but collapsed in places like this deeply conservative manufacturing town where many weren't interested in them to begin with. Yeah, as soon as you stop forcing people to do something, they don't do it anymore. Wow, this number's still high. The average number of Americans getting their first Pokemon sticker is down to about 90,000 a day. That's still a lot of people. They're saying it's the lowest point since the first few days of the U.S. Smack the Nation campaign. So who knows? All these statistics are probably hogwash anyway, but this is what they're leading us to believe. Here's our last story for today. 19.47. Now, one of the first things that I looked at and learned about when I started really digging into just truth and things about truth was the number 19.47. There's something about that number that means something. Now, I haven't taken a look at this in a long time, but this article is saying that at 19.4 degrees, that this is where mankind may have began. The search for the origins of mankind leads here. 19.4 north, 33.7 east. Now, this location falls in Sudan on the map, Eastern Africa. It may be the ancestral homeland of everyone alive today. Scientists at the University of Oxford have applied computing models to thousands of ancient and modern genomes to create a vast family tree showing how individuals across the world are related to each other. It suggests that everyone is partially related to a group of hominids who lived in northeast Africa more than 1 million years ago. I don't believe that they lived 1 million years ago, but this is what they're saying. The very earliest ancestors we identify do indeed trace back in time to a geographic location that is in modern Sudan. Now, this is, I think, south of where I believe the Garden of Eden was, between the Tigris and Euphrates. But this is interesting nonetheless. So those are the headlines for today, you guys. I'm going to come back in here into the chat, see what you guys are up to. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm glad everybody could join. I don't know what happened to this first show we looked at about this person falling out the window. Somebody sent this to me, and I should have probably looked first. Let me scroll through this real quick and see if I can find where this person fell out of the window. Oh, here we go. Here it is right here. For some, it got a lot worse than losing a farm. During a call with shareholders, George Allen, chairman of the massive weed brand Lowell Farms, called the situation facing California weed growers a modern-day grapes of wrath. He spoke of learning about the death of a humble grower who Allen said jumped to his death from a 4-story building. What sorrow. He jumped because he was so in the hole. He saw no way out. Allen doesn't have permission from the family to divulge details, but he says he believes the grower's death is not an isolated situation. And I think what happens in this case, this guy who jumped out the window, we know that there's a jumping out the window meme going on right now, but I think people get to a certain point where they come to a realization that all that they believed was a certain way was not that way at all. That the legalization wasn't the way to go. The way to go was decriminalization, not legalization. Because with legality comes rules and laws, doesn't it? And so he jumped out the window, got in over his head. And you don't mess with the feds, you guys. You owe taxes, you owe, there's all these things that could happen. They'll put you in jail for not paying. And especially in this case, where they're on you, you're a grower, and they got all these rules. They see one wrong thing, they can throw you in jail if they want. I try to stay as far away from the government as possible. I don't want them in my business. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to interact with them. I don't want to owe them anything. And so I do what I have to do and I get out of the way, because these people are psychopaths. They will literally gaslight you. They'll show up to your house. They will do whatever they need to do to drive you crazy. So the best thing to do is stay out of their way. Why would you want to now have your business of growing weed under the nose of the government? That just makes absolutely no sense to me. I think a lot of these people finally came to the realization. And think about the heightened level of fear. So some people are obviously going to, go around all this and try to do things on their own. But think about the level of fear. I knew someone once and they said helicopters were flying over their house because they were there monitoring all the other grows. And now you've got all these feds crawling around all of these counties that used to grow all this stuff without much oversight because it's been legalized now. So they got helicopters. And think about it. If a guy with a Glock and a bulletproof vest and a $60,000 truck and a laptop will give me a $300 ticket for catching a fish, then you can imagine the kind of law enforcement that is put behind regulating the weed industry, which is 100 times more serious. Of course they are. And they're going to make mistakes when they raid these places. They're going to say, oh, I saw a gun, so I had to take the person out. You know how they do. They make stuff up. So who wants to be part of that? Not me. So back in here in the chat. It's still not legal federally. I know that, Bill, but why are they getting these excise taxes? Feds are still picking up 15% excise taxes. How can they get an excise tax if they're still not considering it legal? That doesn't make sense to me. We covered that on a show a couple shows ago. I mean, I'm not saying that you're wrong. What I'm saying is the unfairness of the government. That's not fair that they should get an excise tax but still not make something legal. And to me, that's just more of the setup. It's basically the reason why they're not making it legal is so that they can have an excuse to still prosecute who they want to. Like if someone gets too successful, or they won't sell out to the corporate agribusiness of it all, or they won't go GMO, now they have a way they can harass these people. Right? Good cop, bad cop. That's what it's about. The states are the good cop, the feds are the bad cop. They keep running this playbook since the beginning of time. All right. Thanks, Warrior for Truth. Thanks, everybody, for showing up. Okay, I got to make this smaller because it's going by pretty fast. They are crooks. Shark bait. Yes, absolutely. They do not require licenses to travel, fish hunt, get married, on and on. We have never been free to do much of anything. Yeah, I mean, you need a license for everything. Think about this too. Why is it so easy to get married, but it's so hard to get divorced? Makes you wonder, right? Why is it you can go down to a courthouse, get a certificate, literally a piece of paper that looks like you got out of a gumball machine, and you get a pastor, and those are the only two things you need, and literally in seconds you can be married. But then you try to divorce, and you got to go to courts and get attorneys and go to classes and this is and that is. Makes no sense. And this is why I fully believe that the current form of marriage under the state is not what God intended. That's the devil's form of it. And you can, there were no certificates given. I mean, the New Testament mentions a certificate of divorce, but nowhere in there are there rules that the Bible puts on how you marry somebody. And so, do we really want to go into a contract with the state to marry someone? Of course not. Of course not. To me, that's my personal opinion. Some people will disagree with me. My friend Kelly that I was telling you that just passed away, he actually got married because of pressure from the church. They were on him, or he felt convicted. He was one of those guys, God rest his soul. He was saved, but in all the wrong ways. Does that make sense? He would be bad, drink too much, and the first thing he would do is go to the church the next day and give his money away and think that that absolved him of his sins. He would put $100 bills in the pass around plate. I went with him and watched him do it a couple times. I was like, that's not how God works, man. God doesn't want your money. Your money isn't absolving you of your sins. Repentance is, and belief in Christ. You've already been forgiven. And so this is what the church have people believing that they have to do. That you have to literally, part of your responsibility is propping up a building and paying people salaries and keeping the lights on for a church. Anyway, his pastor convinced him that he was living in sin because he was living with his girlfriend for like 15 or 20 years and that he needed to be married. And so what did he do? He went out and threw a $30,000 wedding or more. I don't know exactly how much it cost. I was in his wedding. And guess what happened? A year later, he got a divorce. Now he had to undo all that, which basically crushed him. And so many people, we create our own problems that happen to us in our life. If you really look at a lot of people's lives and all the problems they have, a lot of it was created from choices and decisions that we've made, isn't it? Myself included. I've been through this, you guys. Got married twice and was broke twice. The common denominator, marriage. Giving your money away. Getting yourself into situations where you've given all of your power and control away, and then who ends up broke? Who ends up on the bottom end? It's choices and decisions that we make. And until we start making different choices and decisions, understanding how this system works, and that a lot of these things, these licenses and all this stuff that the enemy has set up in his system of control is meant to sabotage you. Heck, I used to want to learn hunting, right? I was like, man, one day I'm going to get a couple pop sticks and I'm going to learn to hunt better. Because when I was younger, I was able to my friend had a 22. My dad bought me a 12 gauge and we just hopped the fence with our pop sticks. Walked along the canal, along the grapevines in Woodbridge, California, and popped them off. Nobody bothered us. Perfectly legal. This was in the 80s, early 90s. Well, 80s, I would say 80s, late 80s. Now you can't do that anymore. You'll have SWAT teams descending upon you, ticketed, fined, thrown in jail. You can't just pop things off unless you're in a designated area, right? With all full-blown licensing and a certain age. Now, did accidents happen back then with less regulation? Of course they did. But it's like anything else, God protects people. And that helps us navigate through situations. And yeah, accidents happen. But, this whole licensing thing and, marriage license and this and that and contracts with the state and the feds, You would be crazy to enter into contracts with these people, because they're just going to basically take advantage of you. And you have to be careful how you enter into contracts with other people too. So that's all I'm saying. I've learned a lot. I'm 47 years old, and I've learned a lot in my life, starting over many, many times. One thing I learned is paying rent is like burning your money in a pit. You're basically giving your money away, when it's very simple to take a few steps or save money for a few years and not have to pay rent. And we've talked about that from time to time. Mortgages and rent. It's very hard to sustain over the course of your entire life a payment promise to anybody. Anybody. A bank, a mortgage lender, a life insurance. Very few people, unless you have a very solid job, like a state worker or a federal worker. And even those jobs aren't so solid anymore. During the years my mom worked for the state, she never got laid off, never got furloughed, and she always made more money the next year before the last year. So that was a good job for her to have mortgages and pay monthly payments of things. But most of us don't have that luxury, do we? We're at the whims of the economy. Jobs come and go. And the minute you can't pay your bills, guess what? You got all this pressure on you. You've got to perform. You got to get another job. You got to do this. You got to do that. Why people go into a 30-year mortgage doesn't make sense to me. And the Bible says that that's not even biblical. It's supposed to be 7 years is the maximum amount of time you're supposed to pay anything back. And after that, your debt goes away, according to the Bible. So where did the enemy come up with a 30-year mortgage? Makes no sense to me. Now, this isn't a criticism of anyone stuck in these situations. This is just counsel. It's to help you understand that, look, a lot of us have already been there, done that. And yeah, there are success stories. I've heard them. But even the success stories, I hear people saying, I worked 5 jobs to continue to pay my mortgage. That doesn't sound like success to me. Being a slave to your mortgage and working 5 jobs just to keep paying money to somebody where most of it's interest makes no sense. So that's just some thoughts. What else do you guys have in here? What does this say? That's a good comment. Our pastor, small undenominational, chewed out my daughter and husband 2 hours after marital problems. I did not like it. If they were wrong, he also brought large house, car, swimming pool, mission in Africa. I always tell you guys this story. Well, I haven't told this story in a while, but I was at a certain point in my marriage, and I wasn't paying tithe. Never did. Never believed in it. Even back then, even when I was regularly attending church, I'm like, this isn't right. Tithe? Well, that's from the Old Testament, first of all. Second of all, it wasn't talking about money. It was talking about crops, which it's easy to, 10% of that goes bad anyway. So, you give God your first fruits. You can't eat everything that's grown. So that makes a lot more sense to me. But paying taxes and then on top of it paying another 10% of after-tax income, that just doesn't make sense. I mean, literally, you're working for 40% of your money. And so I went to the pastor and I was like, okay, there's a reason why I'm not paying tithe. Like, maybe I'd be more willing to do it if this. And I was like, what is that reason? And I was like, oh, well, I felt this pressure from my other half, a lifestyle that she kind of wanted. Now, look, don't get me wrong. It wasn't like, crazy, but it was just that lingering thing, that whole Joel Osteen thing. Oh, we got this car now. Well, next in 3 years, we'll get the newer version with the convertible. And we should just remodel this house so it's perfect. And we need to go on 3 trips a year, even if it costs 10 grand. Like that kind of pressure, And I'm just not wired that way. Okay. I know some people think that that's just what you're supposed to do in a relationship, but I'm not wired that way. I don't like that kind of pressure. Okay. I don't like that whole thinking of the future and it's all financial stuff. So anyway, I was like, well, maybe I can go in and talk to my pastor and he can, counsel us, or, maybe there's another couple out there that we can all sit down with. We can all have an honest discussion about finances, right? It's simple, right? You think that's something simple. Pastor should be able to accommodate that. And maybe, I can soften my heart to give more to the church, and she could soften her heart and not have so many financial expectations, so I can have the ability to do so, and we could come to some kind of consensus, some kind of compromise, right? Which would probably benefit both of us. This is what I was thinking. I wasn't wanting to go in there and railroad her and be like, oh, it's all her fault why we can't pay tithe. I was like, okay, we'll all sit down and talk about this, and maybe I can give up some ground here. So at that time, I was like 15 grand in credit card debt, which was, again, part of the problem. Borrowing things, having to pay it back, paying interest on things that you aren't even using anymore. You're paying for things that are already old and thrown in the garbage. It's crazy. It is insanity. So I go in, and talk to the pastor. I'm like, hey, pastor, here's my issue. What should I do? What should I do, pastor? Can we all sit down and talk about this? He said, well, Casey, here's what you need to do. You need to go on faith, and you need to give the 10% anyway, even if you have to put it on a credit card. And that was when I started waking up to the church deception. And that all they really care about is keeping their doors open and getting more people to keep their doors open. That what pastor in their right mind would tell somebody who's in credit card debt to keep giving 10%, even knowing that they would have to put that on a credit card? That makes absolutely no sense to me. And so that's what I did. I started to wake up. I started to realize the deception, that this whole system, even the church system, the organized church system, has lots of problems with it. A credit card tithe. Yeah, I was like, I almost fell out of my chair. I quietly walked. I was fuming because there was no accountability. There was no, oh, let's talk to your wife about this. There was zero accountability. Why? Because she was giving 10% of her income working as a church secretary, and so he was happy about that, which was further impacting our financial situation. And then when I got laid off, nobody wanted to help me because I was pretty much the sole provider of the family. I said, well, you're going to have to get a job because we can't keep this house. And all the pressure fell on me. I had to scramble, figure out how to make 80 grand a year again, because we were, all the way up to the limit of our income. And I kept begging her, please, we need to not spend all the money we make. We should be saving some of this. Or maybe we should sell this house and rent somewhere. Nope, wasn't having it. You got to keep pushing forward. The whole Joel Osteen mindset. And then when you're caught holding the bag, nobody wants to help you. Nobody wants to give you a break. You have to pull a rabbit out of a hat. And you'll realize, too, that when you get stuck in those situations that you put yourself in, because I put myself in that situation, right? That God isn't going to help you. He's not going to help you because you put yourself there. He'll have some grace. He'll kind of try to help you. But in order to help you, you got to give everything up. Right? And so that's just a personal story, and just to help you guys understand that, look, you got to be careful in this life, because when you get caught holding the bag, it's a really horrible feeling. It's a really horrible feeling. A lot of people don't survive it. A lot of people jump off a bridge, based on what I was reading, what was it? Oh, it was, did you know that, what's his name? Dr. Dre, he got a divorce, right? He had to pay his ex-wife $250 million. Now, I don't feel bad for Dr. Dre, but I think they put those stories out there as some kind of a pre-programming to make men go, okay, I guess that's the cost of marriage, right? I don't even think he probably really paid her that much, but that's what they say he had to pay his ex-wife, who was basically, yeah, they both raised their kids together, But in terms of, money, she wasn't producing money. He was the one producing all the money. And so I feel like they put those stories out there so that men go, okay, that's just what we're supposed to do. I lost everything again. That's not what God intended. That's not what God intended for us, or for anybody for that matter. If the roles were reversed and it was women that the same thing happened to, God would not approve of that. But that is the reality we live in now. It's crazy. Now, I know they're the other side of the coin. I know that there are women who don't get a dime from their exes, who don't pay. I don't even know how that works in today's society, because when it happened to me, within a week, there was a mandatory court order pulling money out of my check. And anywhere I worked, anywhere where I got a W-2 form, it was automatically, boom, taken out. And in the first several months, they overtook. Now, they gave some of that back, but I look in my account and I had like a few $100s left. I'm like, how am I supposed to survive? But this is the system we live in. And it all happens when you sign up for their contracts. So don't let people pressure you. If you're, look, I know some of my Christians and brothers and sisters are going to say, that's not biblical case. You should be married if if you're with someone. Yes, married under what the Bible says. Was there a certificate in Genesis? Was there a pastor marrying people? Did Adam and Eve and all the first generations of the Bible? No. The system that we have was set up by the devil. He's the one that set up the current form of marriage that we have now, with all these rules and custody and thises and that's. None of it's in the Bible. In fact, when there was a custody battle, the only one I can think of in the Bible was when Solomon and the two women came forward and said, this is my baby. And Solomon says, okay, let's just split it in half. And the real mother said, you know what? Let the baby go with her. I would rather have the baby alive. And that's the choice I had to make with my children. Do I want to fight this woman and ruin my children's lives, make them choose, make them get guilt tripped by her every time they come over my house? Do I want to split them in half? Or because I love them so much, will I just concede and let them come when they want and not try to force them? I did Solomon's approach, or the woman who really loved the child. And you know what? It's a blessing that I now have the chance to explain to my son why I didn't see him as much. And you know what's amazing? He understands. Because he told me, he said, you know what, Dad? You never abused us. You never got drunk and crazy and did crazy things and said crazy things to us. It was Mom that did that. And he is awake to it. He gets it. And that's what love does. That's what love does. And look, I don't even blame people anymore. It's the system that makes people act the way they do. It's the system. It's, the system gives you this false sense of power for some people. They get a judge behind them or a court or an order, and they start wielding that like it's a weapon. And it changes them. They become possessed by it. Oh, you're going to pay. Don't give in to that either. So anyway, those are just some thoughts and some personal stories. I tell these stories to help you guys. I know that when God impresses upon my heart to tell these stories, it's because somebody in the chat is going through it. Okay. And they need to hear this, these explanations and things. That's why I talk about these things, you guys, because in the moment of discussing these things, God is impressing upon me that somebody is going through this and needs to hear what I'm saying, that it will help them through the situation that they're in right now, or a situation they're about to get themselves into. Okay? You can commit yourself to someone in a lifelong loving relationship without entering into all these agreements that the enemy has created to trap you and ensnare you, is what I'm trying to say. And don't let any church, especially churches that tell you to put tithe on a credit card, try to dictate to you. Oh, by the way, this same pastor who told me that ended up stealing somebody else's wife, married her, and dumped his other wife. So We're all men here. Men shouldn't be leading over men and putting rules on them. So anyway, you guys, I'll leave it at that. I love each and every one of you. I hope you guys have a great weekend. And we may be back on the weekend. We'll see what headlines pop up. I'm going to try to get into some more decodes about some other things we got. I did watch a movie called what was it called? You guys, this movie had hydras all throughout the movie. It was talking about mold. It was called The Privileged. And one of you asked me to look at this movie. Now, I probably won't decode it because I watched it and I didn't capture the screenshots. But it was called The Privileged. And I was like, watching this movie and they're talking about mold infestation. And this hydra that they put in these people's pineal gland that took over their bodies. I was like, this is crazy. I think it was a German film. But anyway, I wanted to tell you about that. But we'll be back on the weekend or Monday. Take care, everybody. Much love.